like I said, one of the things I used to do every Friday night was basically I would throw up. I would throw up similar to Jamie Foxx on any given Sunday. Time I go in for my shift, I'm in the parking lot. Welcome to DebtFreeinIT. I'm your host, Mike. This podcast is for anyone who's looking to get into the IT industry, whether it's for a career change or you're just interested. I think you come to the right place. So looking back on my career, there's 3 moves that push me out of my comfort zone. So most of us, we like to stay in that comfort zone where it feels safe. But every time I've stepped out of mine, it made me better. In this episode, I'm breaking down each of those moves, why they were so intimidating at the time, and how they helped shape me into the IT professional I am today. So let's get to it. So the first move I can think of that took me out of my comfort zone, this is when I first got into IT. So basically, this is when I went from working at Advanced Auto to working as a computer ops in a healthcare facility. So basically, this was a big jump because before then, I never had no IT experience. You know, I had some call center experience where basically I'm doing tech support over the phones, but I never had anything that would say or anything that I could say that I was an IT professional yet. So basically, coming from Advanced Auto, if you don't know what Advanced Auto is, basically the car store you go to, you know, you get your oil, you get any kind of maintenance materials for your car. So I was working at Advanced Auto at the time. So basically going from Advanced Auto to getting this first job as a computer operator, that was the first time I became an IT professional. So that was my very first introduction into a real IT organization. So basically it took me out of my comfort zone because, first of all, like I said, it was my first role. So I'm moving to a new environment, new expectations, not knowing what to expect, and not knowing exactly what the role was because I basically applied for this role roughly about maybe 6 months to a year before I got called in. So when I got called, I didn't necessarily remember what I had applied for. So it was a lot of feelings and emotions going through around that time. So basically, like I said, this was my first role, first time in an IT environment. And then once I got the position, I was the first line of defense. So basically, computer ops is real similar to helpdesk, except for you actually run backups. You know, you do maintenance in the data center. You know, you have little checks you do every so often. But basically, you still on those phones. So basically, once I started working this position, I was the first line of defense for a lot of issues. My main shift was third shift. So one of my issues was, hey, I was the first line of defense. So on third shift, you know, there's no regular IT support team there. So there's no one from networking there. There's no one from desktop there. There's no one from the server team there. There's no one from applications there. So basically, that computer operator, you're the only person there. And then sometimes, you know, in some places, depending on the size of the organization, you may have multiple people working this computer operator role to where you're not alone. Maybe it's a couple of people there on your shift. But basically for me, most of the time on third shift for a good portion of my time there, you know, I was the only one there. And then after a little bit, you know, it was me and a coworker. So basically we were the first line of defense for a lot of the issues that happened overnight. So anything that goes on overnight, computer-wise, server-wise, application-wise, everybody called into that computer operator line. So I was the first line of defense. And then the second thing was, like I said, sometimes I would be the only one on site on third shift. And basically, you know, if this is your first role and you're the only person on site, a lot of times, you know, that could be nerve-wracking. So I remember when I would come in, my particular position was also called a weekend operator, where I worked the weekend shift on third shift. So basically, I would come in, then the second shift person would be getting ready to leave. And I remember every Friday night, like I said, one of the things I used to do every Friday night was basically I would throw up. I would throw up similar to Jamie Foxx on any given Sunday. Time I go in for my shift, I'm in the parking lot, I had to throw up. So I would throw up. Then the next thing was, once I went in and relieved second shift, I would never forget every time second shift would leave, you know, the person on second shift would say, hey, you have a good weekend. And that would be the last voice I heard until the next day in the afternoon. So basically, it was nerve-wracking. First line of defense, only person there, and like I said, this was some of the things that it took me out of my comfort zone, because before this, like I said, I was working at Advance. Well, basically, your Advance closes around about 9 or 10. So basically, you had plenty of people there. You wasn't the only one there. So basically, like I said, this here is one of the things that took me out of my comfort zone. And then with anything that takes you out of your comfort zone, it has to make you better. So one way that this position made me better was, one of the things was I learned to stay calm and get comfortable working under pressure. Because for me, my biggest fear was, oh, what if I'm the only one there and then everything just goes down, or all hell just breaks loose? Well, that was my biggest fear, and a lot of times that's what would happen. So I learned to work under pressure, learned to be comfortable under pressure in that position, because basically once everything starts going haywire, I'm responsible for calling everyone, waking them up, getting the correct people on the phone to fix that issue. So a lot of times I would work there so much, and I got so comfortable with the position where I knew everything, where if something was alerting, I was able to be more of a proactive than reactive. So if something was alerting, I knew that, okay, if this continues to alert, I know that this is going to cause this issue, and this may be this fix to it. So now, instead of me having to call and wake up someone, sometimes I'm able to go in and resolve the issue myself. So, that helped me to gain confidence. And then also, like I said, I was able to work under pressure, and I didn't get all out of whack, as I may say, because, that first time, if you're the only one there and everything goes down, you start to panic. You don't know who to call. When you start to panic, you make mistakes, because even though that issue is going on, you still have to do whatever your other duties is on that shift. So someone that panics, even though that issue is going on and you're panicking about that issue, you start making mistakes in other areas of that particular position. So after a while, you learn to deal with it. You get better with working under pressure. And then the second way that it made me better was basically this position helped me gain a clear understanding of each department and the systems that they manage. So basically saying this, every issue that came in, if it happened on third shift, then basically I would either put in a ticket for it and send it to the correct team, or I would call someone on the correct team. So after a couple of years, I was probably on third shift or in this position for roughly about 4 or 5 years. So basically, after a couple of years, you start to learn what every team does, what every department manages, the systems that they use, the applications that they use. So it helped me develop a clear understanding of what each department did. And then also, it also helped me develop a clear understanding of the different positions for each department. Like you often hear me say that if you're going for networking, look for those entry-level networking roles, a network technician, a network administrator, a network analyst. Same thing for the server side, same thing for cyber side or security side of things. So in this position, it helped me realize that hierarchy where, okay, the entry level may be a technician or administrator or analyst. That's usually 1 to 3 years of experience. Then from there, you have your engineer for most teams. And then you have your senior engineer, which would be the highest. And then some of them may even go a little bit higher and call it an architect. So this is where I learned that trajectory there. I learned that hierarchy of the job. So working in this one position helped me to understand all of those things. And then the last thing, or the last way that it made me better, was basically it helped me develop my troubleshooting skills. So in this position, I was able to go out on the floors. If there was any kind of computer issues, I could go look at the PC. I wasn't necessarily in desktop, but like I said, on the first line of defense. So I can go out, try to troubleshoot it before I call someone. Because when you call someone, especially if you're calling someone and waking them up, you want to make sure you done did everything in your power to try to resolve that issue. So you don't want to call somebody, wake them up, and they have to drive. If it's desktop, they have to drive all the way to that location, and they get to that location and it ain't plugged up. Or they get to that location and just do a reboot and it fixes the issue. So like I said, you want to try to exhaust all your resources before calling someone. So in this position, I learned to get real good at troubleshooting. Well, I say real good, but no one can ever really say you're real good at troubleshooting because you see all kind of issues. So I got pretty decent at it to where I was able to troubleshoot some networking issues where for networking issues, it was simple stuff as in, oh, it's not getting an IP address. Then basically from my position, I couldn't do nothing with that. So, okay. But I was able to spot out those issues, able to get used to or familiar with troubleshooting application issues, able to get familiar with troubleshooting PC issues. So like I said, all of this kind of helped me out in the long run. But basically, this were the ways that it made me better from getting out of my comfort zone and making that move from advanced auto into my first IT position as a computer operator. So the second move that took me out of my comfort zone was when I moved from help desk to desktop. So basically my trajectory went from advanced auto, computer operator, help desk, then desktop. But that move from help desk to desktop, it took me out of my comfort zone again. So basically some of the ways it took me out of that comfort zone was before moving to desktop, I was basically just answering the phones, handling tickets, sending them to different teams, fixing issues remote. You know, I didn't really have to go out on the floor or anything. So basically just taking phone calls all day, you know, and distributing those tickets to the correct team to look at those issues, or maybe if it's an issue I can fix, then I'm able to do that. So I got pretty comfortable doing that again. So the main thing is, like I said, a lot of times you'll get comfortable in a lot of your different positions. So it's hard to get uncomfortable. But a lot of times that's when that growth ended up happening. So basically in this position, I went from answering the phones to more hands-on troubleshooting. And then from going to desktop, you know, there was some points in times where you may have to repair a PC, you know, so I'm going from where I didn't have much experience repairing PCs other than my own PC, which was basically, you know, changing out a disk drive or, you know, adding a hard drive, different things of that nature, some most simple stuff. But sometimes in desktop, you know, you may have to build a PC out of nothing, you know, take some spare parts, build a PC. Or you may have a laptop that the screen breaks. You know, you need to replace the screen on it because you may not have the same laptop to get a person. So basically, I went from talking on those phones to now more hands-on. Now, don't get me wrong, going to this position, this is the first position or the first time in the IT industry where I liked what I was doing. You know, computer ops, I didn't like it. Like I said, I wanted to quit every day. Help desk, I didn't like it because I was still on those phones. So basically when I went to desktop, this is when I started to say I love my job. So I love desktop. You know, desktop was my first love. So if desktop was paying that bread, or if I could make it on desktop, I'd probably still be in desktop. That's how much I love desktop. But like I said, desktop, I went from answering the phones to now on more hands-on, began to go a little bit deeper in repairing PCs and configuring PCs. And then also at desktop, this is where I learned to activate ports. So by activating ports, basically what I mean is, you know, you have a user who's in their office and they got their PC. You know, their PC plugs up into the wall jack. From the wall jack, the other side of the wall jack runs to the networking closet. From the networking closet runs into a patch panel. And then someone has to physically go inside that patch panel, take your networking cable, plug it into the correct port on the patch panel that connects it back to that PC in the desk, and then take that in and go into your switch. So basically, before moving to desktop, I had no idea how to do this. But one of the things that at the position I was at, you know, we was responsible for activating ports. So I was able to learn about that, able to get more familiar with where the networking closets and everything was at my organization. So like I said, but this here was all getting out of my comfort zone. So I didn't really think that, okay, I can do it at the time because like I said, I was in help desk. You know, I'm comfortable in help desk. So, you know, I can only imagine everything looks scary before you get into it. You know, outside looking in, I'm still looking at, oh, I got to call these guys for a computer in an ER or something goes down. These guys got to go and fix it. So I'm still looking at that from that perspective. So But a lot of this stuff that we had to do, it took me out of my comfort zone. And then moving on to how this move made me better. So basically, one way this move made me better was now I went from working on smaller teams to now at desktop, we had a fairly, I would say, mid-sized team. So there was probably roughly close to about 7 to 10 people there. So basically, we had a pretty good team. And by having this team atmosphere, you're able to learn different things from each team member. So I went there as a sponge. I was soaking up all the information from everyone. You're going to have certain team members that's good at certain applications. You got certain team members that does this particular thing. So I was able to learn from all of them, and hopefully they learned something from me. But basically, like I said, at this position with that large team, I was able to soak up some game from a little bit of everyone. And another way this made me better was that at the same time in desktop, I'm learning from my team members, but also in desktop, I was able to work more closely with other teams to resolve issues. So if it was an issue someone from networking was working on and they needed a desktop resource, then like I said, I was able to work with that networking person. So I'm able to kind of get familiar with everyone in the other departments, because before this, basically I haven't ever seen too many people in those other departments by face, because most of the time I'm calling them on third shift. So I'm calling them, they at home unless they have to come in, but I'm calling them even when you're on help desk, you're still calling them. So before then, a lot of people I didn't recognize by face. I knew a lot of people by name, but I didn't know them by face. So this got me to work with more of those teams and more of those administrators, engineers, just to help them resolve their issues, any issues that they may have had that needed someone from desktop. And then another way that this made me better was it expanded my technical knowledge, and I became more proficient and more confident at problem solving, because you have a different set of issues when you're in desktop than when I was in help desk. So, you have more urgent issues in desktop, because usually the person from help desk is the one calling the people from desktop for any kind of urgent issues. So basically, I got more confident in this. And then also, like I said, I became a little bit better at problem solving again. Quick pause. I'd like to introduce you to the Log Files. The Log Files is a weekly newsletter to help you start your IT career with practical advice and tips powered by yours truly. We launched it in the beginning of the year. It's packed with actionable advice, resources, and insights to kickstart your IT journey. The link is in the description as well as pinned in the comments, so don't miss out. Now back to the episode. And then the third move that took me out of my comfort zone was that move from desktop to networking. So, networking had to be in there somewhere. So that move from desktop to networking. So basically this move, it took me out of my comfort zone, because now I had more responsibility than I ever had before. Because you think of it now, like I'm going from fixing issues on the desk side of things, I'm fixing one PC. If I'm dealing with an issue, it's usually one PC, maybe 2 or 3 PCs, but it's only affecting one user, 2 or 3 users, depending on how many PCs I'm fixing. So, but basically going to this networking role, now your issues is more widespread, to where either you got an issue with a whole department, you got an issue with a whole floor, you got an issue at a whole facility, but a lot of times those issues affect more people. And then, so like I said, with anything that affects more people comes greater responsibility. So, you went from fixing one-off issues to now you're fixing issues that, like I said, can become widespread. I've seen issues where whole departments go down. I've seen issues where whole locations go down. But basically, like I said, from being a network professional at that time, your job to troubleshoot it and figure out what's going on. And then another way this took me out of my comfort zone was that I was stepping into a role that I had been afraid to pursue all my life. Like, even though I was certified for Cisco CCNA, once I got into that first role as computer ops, like you hear me say in one of my previous videos, where basically I would see the issues that, I had to contact different teams for, and I would always put myself in that position. So what if that somebody was contacting me? So that made me scared of it. Like I said, from the outside looking in, a lot of times you can talk yourself out of something good. So I'm notorious for doing that. I'll talk myself out of something, So basically, like I said, before then, this was a job or a position I was afraid to pursue because I didn't know what to expect from the outside looking in. Everyone is going to tell you something different. That's why a lot of times I say, if there's anything you're curious about, you need to go try it out for yourself, because you could talk to one person over here. They're going to tell you, oh yeah, you need to go ahead and make that move. You may talk to somebody over here. They're going to say, nah, I wouldn't do that if I were you. So you're going to get both sides of the both ends of the stick. The best bet, go ahead and try it out for yourself. So this was me trying it out for myself. So I got interested in networking again. And, fortunately, I was able to move up to networking. But like I said, this was a job that I had always been kind of afraid to pursue. And basically how this made me better. So basically it made me get comfortable with having more responsibility, so that wasn't a big issue. So I could handle the responsibility. I was pretty good at working under pressure just because of those computer ops days. I often say that was the first position that got me comfortable working under pressure. And after that position, I can work under anything. So basically I was comfortable working under pressure. And then, like I said, from the outside looking in, the job was more scarier. So once I got there, got familiar with everyone, and like I said, I put a lot of things on having a good team. So as long as you're moving somewhere where you got a good team that you can learn from, I think that process is going to be a little bit easier and it's going to be less intimidating. So once I got there, still uncomfortable for a couple of weeks. Then after a couple of months, you get more comfortable. After a year, you're pretty decent, you're pretty comfortable, but you're always learning. So this is that position that kind of changed my mindset to where you got to always learn. You always be willing to learn, because in networking, things change fast. So as you all know that, just look at networking now, it's changed from what we was doing 10, 15 years ago. So networking is one of those positions where there's always something new coming down the pipeline. So there's something new that you need to learn. Maybe it's something you need to learn how to configure. Maybe it's something your organization may be thinking about going over to, but it's something where you're always learning. And hence, you got the certifications out here. So that's why you see Cisco always updating the CCNA certification. The CCNP always gets a revamp, and it kind of gets revamped to mimic what's going on in the real world. So it kind of helps you to prepare for that real world aspect. But basically, like I said, I discovered that, okay, the job was more scarier from the outside looking in. Once I got in, everyone was real cool. My team was real cool. I was able to learn from them. I was basically the lowest position there almost. So basically everyone else there was engineers and seniors. So basically I could just ask them questions all day. So it helped me to learn a lot. I was able to shadow with them. If they went off on an issue and I didn't have nothing going on, I'm able to go and learn from them. So basically, like I said, once I got there and I discovered all this, I was like, oh, I kind of was a little bit mad at myself because I should have tried to move to networking when I was in computer ops with that first CCNA the first time, but I didn't. So hindsight looking back, if you're in this position, I say just go for it. You know what I'm saying? You never know until you try. And then the last way this made me better is those troubleshooting skills that I've been building. This position made me get more advanced with troubleshooting. So now I can not just troubleshoot on the hardware side of things from my desktop days, but now I can troubleshoot from the networking side of things, which in my eyes gave me a superpower almost, because if a desktop issue was sent to the networking team, I could kind of spot it out and say, oh, this is something that belongs to desktop, and I can call someone for desktop. Or if desktop calls and they got an issue, I was able to help them out too. So like I said, I was pretty decent on both sides of the ball there. But basically, like I said, this networking position, it got me advanced. It gave me more advanced troubleshooting, critical thinking skills, because now I'm going from the moves I make not only affecting this one person, but it's often affecting, a whole organization, unless I'm just working on one particular PC or there's one particular device having network issues. But that responsibility, it gets a little bit higher. So a lot of times, like I said, you go from working on issues for one person to now your issues affects a whole organization or maybe even a couple of people. So, but like I said, this is one of the things I think that made me better by going to networking from desktop. So let me know in the comments if you ever had to get out of your comfort zone, and if when you moved out of your comfort zone, did it benefit you or did it hurt you? I'm pretty sure it benefited you in some way. That brings me to the end of this episode. Hopefully you found some value in this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, you can follow me at DebtFreeinIT. If you have any questions, you can email me at debtfreeinit@gmail.com, or you can visit debtfreeinitwithmike.com. Other than that, I'll see you next week. Peace.